Hi, everyone. Thanks very much for joining today's webinar from around the world. Really appreciate your time to join Roshan and I to cover our webinar for the next about 45 minutes or so. It's titled Don't Drown in a Sea of Cyberthreats. So we're talking about the capabilities of IBM BigFix and QRadar together as a great solution set. So with this webinar today, we are covering some items which are on the roadmap for which are included very soon, but with that we have to include some legal text. So hopefully that's okay, just as a background of what we're talking about today as some of the upcoming capability. So today we're going to cover the capabilities of BigFix and QRadar, give you an overview of both of those products and particularly some of the integration capabilities and benefits of both of those products together, and of course talk about some of the closed loop risk mitigation capabilities which are coming out very soon on between both products. And we'll have some Q&A via the chat session, so if you've got any questions along the way, feel free to let us know. And also once the webinar is completed, feel free to contact us. We've got some contacts at the back of the slides in terms of both endpoint and QRadar specialists. So, what are organizations facing? Certainly, if you're involved in IT, there's the increasing complexity of on-prem, cloud, and the various issues that companies are facing with different tools, and of some of those which are multiple solutions, and obviously doing more with less. And certainly tools like BigFix and QRadar are around giving you those efficiencies and making things different for IT to make things easier to manage those large variety of different types of computing infrastructure in your environment. And within the security context, there was an interesting study by Verizon, and it was talking about some of the types of vulnerabilities that organizations are facing in terms of the different product sets that they've got, but particularly that those various vulnerabilities are certainly exploited at some point by hackers out there. And interesting enough, is really the speed of these attacks that really within the first 4 weeks, most of those vulnerabilities are being attacked. So certainly the speed of applying patches and addressing those vulnerabilities certainly needs to be increased, and organizations are really needing tools like BigFix to address those vulnerabilities and the visibility of that with solutions like QRadar, which we'll talk about today. So certainly IBM believes that we have a unique proposition in terms of the threat protection capabilities. We have a broad set of capabilities across the prevention area of your infrastructure, security intelligence. You're really needing a tool that's going to give you that visibility about what's happening in your environment, but with that, the ability to have a continuous response mechanism and visibility of those endpoints which BigFix provides. And certainly both of those tools together working harmoniously in terms of giving you that visibility into a security intelligence product like QRadar is certainly key. So with that, IBM has I guess a broad set of capabilities that you can draw upon when you need to address some of those threat protections we mentioned in the last slide, and I guess ultimately the speed of addressing those. So, if you're aware of BigFix, it's back with its original name because clients loved IBM BigFix as a name, so otherwise as known as IBM Endpoint Manager. It's a tool which addresses endpoint management and security in the one product. We'll show you a bit of that tool today if you haven't used the product. It's a platform which, once deployed, has a range of services which you can enable as required. So it's primarily, its background has been patching, and obviously particularly Windows is one of those platforms that many customers have. But with those agents deployed across a large variety of operating systems, we can do patching, software distribution, you can see here we do software compliance and usage. So certainly for a lot of clients, getting the visibility as to what software they've got deployed, but particularly how often it's being used, is a great value, and that can be enabled in the product as well. BigFix also has the ability to be continually monitoring those endpoints and giving you security and compliance checks, and we'll talk about more of those today. We also have integrated antivirus, anti-malware capabilities, which can be enabled, and also the ability from an incident response perspective to query your environment and look for those issues which have maybe been introduced into your environment which you need to address. So BigFix, really that end-to-end product that provides both endpoint management and security in one, from the data center all the way through to those disparate endpoints in your environment. And next, QRadar, I'll hand over to Dan to cover this.
Excellent. All right. So one of the key takeaways of an enterprise SIEM is the ability for it to ingest and digest any type of data that you throw at it. And with the integration with any of the endpoints, you have a significant contribution in prioritizing your threats in your environment, because it is your endpoint that brings in the visibility of reducing false positives in your environment. To summarize, one of the key capabilities of QRadar is for you to not get overwhelmed with the number of offenses that you get, but for you to look at 3 or 4 different offenses in a day that you need to fix first. And with the capability of integrating BigFix back into QRadar, what we are able to precisely pinpoint is those 5 incidents that you need to fix first. And how are we doing that is basically taking in feeds, patch feeds, antivirus feeds from the endpoint, normalizing that and tagging it back to relevant assets that are involved in correlation rules in the system. And because we are able to do that seamlessly, we are able to pinpoint exactly machines that are susceptible to a potential problem in the environment. We can also track it back to the communication ports that are open in your environment and predict the probability of you being attacked on a specific vulnerability. And hence, the integration between BigFix and QRadar is not only unidirectional because it's not just a static input. So as the patches get applied onto your endpoint, the relevant state of that specific endpoint is dynamically added to the asset database in QRadar. And because the number of vulnerabilities reduce or increase, the priorities of a specific asset involved in the correlation rule and the criticality of that specific asset involved in the correlation rule increases or decreases dynamically. And that basically is the essence of the integration. Next slide, Taz. All right, Taz. Next slide.
Hopefully you see that now, okay.
All right. So when we talk about the integration, there are 2 levels of integration back with BigFix and QRadar. The first level of integration is just to audit BigFix itself to figure out what are the patches that have been applied by BigFix on the endpoint, what are the activities of a specific administrator, and what are the fixlets that have been deployed on your endpoint, and how often has this been done. And that's one of the key visualization that you get out of QRadar. The second level of integration is when we integrate BigFix as a scanner into QRadar. And this integration is the one that carries the crux of the vulnerability and the patch status of each one of these assets involved in the scan profile of BigFix. And we enrich that within the asset database and use the criticality and the vulnerabilities associated with it to dynamically calculate a relevance score in QRadar when we fire up a correlation rule. Let's go next slide. All right, so this this is basically the asset database that I was talking about, right? So every asset that is discovered by QRadar automatically populates the associated vulnerabilities with it. And it gives you that single pane of glass view from an administration standpoint that when you know a specific asset is involved in a high severity offense in your environment, you also easily can drill down and tag it back to the vulnerabilities that it's prone to. And this particular view is dynamically updated based on the remediation strategies that you've adopted on the endpoint. And it's really, really critical that I emphasize this integration capabilities because it reduces false positives. Everything that is throwing out a red alert in your endpoint does not mean you have a potential problem in your environment, right? What we try to do in QRadar is bring in that relevance for your environment and precisely pinpoint these 5 things to fix with the asset database. Let's go to the next slide.
Hopefully let's see that.
Yep. All right. So from a use cases standpoint, right, there are different use cases that are available out of the box in QRadar, but one of the key things that you need to remember for a successful use case to fire, you need to have the relevant data and accurate data that is contributing to the use case. So if you're looking at advanced threat detection, one of the key things as an input that QRadar will look for is visibility on the endpoint and the ability to marry your current status of your antivirus and your vulnerability information to preemptively predict a potential problem in your environment, right? So when you're looking at advanced use cases that involve DLLs being exploited or a unique security incidents associated with the endpoint, we want that specific information being transferred back into the system, into the SIEM that we can efficiently correlate across. And that's what BigFix does. Basically, it contributes the relevant data that is required for advanced threat intelligence use cases to fire off automatically. If we talk about use cases around malicious activity identifications, a couple of key use cases will be malware detection and prediction of malware propagation in your environment, and cross-reference that back into any database instance or any endpoint instance or a cloud-based instance that you may have in your environment. And we can do that pretty efficiently with this integration. We have out-of-the-box rules that map the relevant information that we gather from BigFix and create correlation rules that precisely pinpoint where the specific problem is, targets that were involved, sources that were involved, part of the attack, and activities that were detected at the endpoint that can emphasize the problem in your environment. User activity monitoring basically looks at policy and passcode enforcement, security configurational changes, and the current antivirus policies that have been running on your endpoint. We can basically look at correlating that against non-compliant standards in your baselines in your environment. This is a pretty common use case that we use which we take in policy definitions of the enterprise and use that as a baseline and map it back against deviations that we detect from the logging that we receive from the endpoints. And compliance is one of the key drivers both at the endpoint and from the SIEM perspective. And compliance is all about you being able to prove right now what is your current state of security or what is the current state of compliance for a security standard. And with QRadar, the input from BigFix basically enriches the type of reporting that you compliance-based reporting that you get out of the box, be it PCI or be it ISO. BigFix has a compliance module that enables you to trigger off specific activities and monitor specific activities associated to a specific compliance, which in turn can be transferred back into QRadar, and we can then populate that back into your dashboard. So that from a centralized visibility perspective, you have a single dash that talks about your current state of risk, your current state of security, and your current state of compliance. And to sum it all up, fraud detection is one of the key drivers, and with the co-protection module in BigFix, we do have an integrated DLP functionality that is present, and with the effective logging of and data classification done, we can take in information that is associated that BigFix co-protection logs and correlate back against user activity or connections to a known bad malware or botnet that is present in your environment. So to summarize, right, these are just a broad framework of the type of use cases that you can achieve, but leveraging additional modules along the BigFix containers enables QRadar to basically broaden the views of correlations that you can actually, or the use cases that you can actually achieve in your environment.
Thanks, Rashan. So what we'd like to do now is both of us, show you the products, show you BigFix first. We'll show you the dashboard and make you aware of the new capabilities within the Windows user interface, and then I'll hand to Rashan to sort of show you the IBM QRadar interface as well and give you an overview of that integration as well. So what we'll do now is jump out of the presentation, and I'll show you the current Windows user interface for BigFix, as you can see here. And this is within the patch management module. So it's one of the various modules, as we mentioned before, in terms of capability that you can enable as required in your environment. So you can see for this lab environment, visibility to the amount of patches for the different types of operating systems. And these are provided by Fixlets, which come from the IBM Cloud Content Service. So, for instance, we can look here at the different operating systems in this lab environment. You can see here we can see the numbers of patches required for Mac systems, for Windows. We've got visibility to Linux and Unix and other systems as required. But interesting enough, we can actually toggle to see the total amount of content available that's brought down by the BigFix server to this environment. So you can see here quite a large number of different patches and content for Windows, likewise for Linux and for VMware in this case. But for my lab environment, you can see I can toggle it back and it's showing me visibility to the amount of patches which are required for that environment. So we can look at the recent content here and get visibility to the different types of patches and sort on that by criticality. So you can easily see from this dashboard, the various types of patches that are required for the operating systems in my environment in real time. So the endpoints have looked at these Fixlets, analyzed the results. They do that on a continual basis and then send that results back to the actual BigFix server. So this is both for the operating system, but we do that above the operating system layer into a various range of third-party applications as well. So very complementary in terms of looking at things in both Flash and Java and other systems which need to be patched as well. So you can see here in this environment, 5 computers out of 79 need this various patch being applied. And it's very simple to apply that patch as a baseline to a range of systems and then deploy that to hundreds, up to tens of thousands of devices very quickly. So you can certainly scale based on our architecture to support really over 250,000 endpoints per BigFix server. Now, depending on your licensing that you want to enable, you'll get other different modules that will arrive here. So you can start to do security configuration. You can do server automation and start to automate various patching cycles in your data center. And you can do other things like remote control, remote operating system builds as required too. Again, all from this dashboard. Now, what's being progressively made available is the web interface for BigFix. So over time, things will move to the web user interface progressively. The Windows user interface will certainly stay around for quite some time to come, but over time we're moving to this nice user interface in terms of doing various functions with BigFix. You can see for this environment here, it's giving me visibility to the types of security vulnerabilities in the environment. We can then drill down onto those endpoints, as you can see here, and get visibility into the types of operating systems we have in the environment. And we can drill down even further still to get some information on that endpoint. So it's nice in terms of the visibility as to the type of system we're looking at, but also the types of patches which may apply to that endpoint as well. So we certainly, you can see that you can provide this dashboard to certain types of maybe roles in your organization, so maybe certain functions can be provided to them, but to know that this interface is where the user interface for BigFix will be headed over time in terms of various admin functions as well. So very, very straightforward, as you can see here, in terms of the web UI with BigFix. So what I'll do now is I'll just hand over the presenting rights to Sean. I'll just make you presenter, and he'll walk you through the interface for QRadar, so you can see that and see how easy it is to operate.
So key sources of integration, like I mentioned. Yep. All right. So one of the key sources of integration for BigFix is leveraging it as a scanner to detect vulnerabilities associated with the endpoint or the patch status that is associated with the endpoint. So in QRadar, it's fairly straightforward. You just go back into your admin page, and you can. I've already added one sample BigFix in this test environment. It's basically integrating a straightforward integration between BigFix and QRadar. There's nothing complex about it. It's just that you need to have web reporting enabled on your BigFix. We use an API to go and fetch the relevant information out from BigFix server and normalize that and tag it back into the asset. The next thing that we do is once the scanner is integrated, we then map it back to a quick view of that will be in your assets database. And if you look at the asset database, this is basically a screenshot that we saw earlier. What basically we do is take the information out that we've got out of the scanner and normalize that and tag it back to the asset. So the key takeaway of this will be you want to figure out what are the correlation rules that this specific asset was involved, and is it a problem in my environment because of the list of vulnerabilities I see associated with this specific asset, right? So in QRadar, with a couple of clicks, right, you can actually move from one screen to the other. So right now we've drilled down into the asset database and basically look at any correlation rules that this specific asset was involved. And it basically tells you this was the offense, and you can actually look at the correlation rule itself, and you can edit this particular correlation rule. You can tune it. You can do whatever you want with this specific correlation rule to tune out false positives. So from an administration standpoint, you have a single view that relates back to an asset, tag it back to the associated vulnerabilities, and then go back and edit your rules if you feel that this specific rule is not firing for a specific asset, right? It's really, really easy to do. And one of the key takeaways is also the vulnerabilities tab in QRadar. So basically what the vulnerability tab is all about is gives you that snapshot view of the list of vulnerabilities present in your environment. So what you could also do is do stuff like show me all the vulnerabilities that I've seen in . my environment for the last 7 days. The assets that are involved as part of this specific vulnerability, the CVSS code associated with it, and if applicable, it also captures information like when virtual patches from different IPS vendors. So from a remediation standpoint, it basically tells you what the problem is, how many assets are involved, part of the problem, and what is it that you can do to fix it. We can also go back and reference back third-party virtual patch databases from various security vendors in the IPS space. And if you have those patches available, you can then prioritize assets or the vulnerabilities that are not covered as part of the virtual patch. So in essence, what you get is a quick way of going through tons of data, tons of vulnerability, and prioritizing what we can fix first. And that's basically the objective, right? You don't want to get overwhelmed with the list of vulnerabilities that you have. Rather, focus on the ones that you want to fix first, which are really, really critical and really apt in the environment that you're deploying this in. The next thing that you can do is you can take whatever information that you have and display it back into a dashboard. So this basically is a standardized, centralized dashboard that you can create in QRadar. You can add your own compliance lists in this and monitor deviations against it. So in essence, this basically gives you your level of compliance, basically talks about the high risk zones in your environment based on the vulnerabilities that I've received from the scan template, and map it back to, say, the server zone is really unpatched right now compared to my DNS zones, which looks all right. So it gives you a nice pictorial representation of your vulnerabilities count as well as to which zone in my environment has contributed the highest in terms of vulnerability state. This is dynamic, so in case there is a fix that is available or you've applied a patch in your environment, you can basically run different searches in QRadar to narrow it down to the list of vulnerabilities, let's say, that are currently not patched. So you have these default search filters that are available. So you can look at information like, can you show me all the assets that have failed my PCI, right? And it basically gives you information of all the vulnerabilities or all the assets that are associated in your environment, right? And this is a really quick way of delving through different types of data and taking this out and then representing it in a visualization format in your dashboard. So that's basically a quick overview integration that we currently have with QRadar and BigFix right now. Having said that, what we intend to do in the future is have a closed loop integration, not just a one-way static integration, wherein which you can look for a specific activity in QRadar and have an API call back into your BigFix server and create a remediation strategy around it. Right, so let's assume you've seen a specific vulnerability that is propagating in your environment in QRadar. You can then, as an action to that specific correlation rule, go back and create a fixlet or deploy a fixlet at your endpoint in BigFix and create a remediation strategy. And that's basically what we call a foolproof integration. Right. One of the key takeaways is right now it's pretty static, wherein which we're just visualizing and representing the current state of risk. But with the future release that's intended to release early next year, what we're planning to do is create a remediation and a quarantine option. So whenever an asset is involved in a potential worm propagation activity, and you know that this particular asset needs to be quarantined, you can quarantine that off at the BigFix server level, or create a custom fixlet to let's say terminate USB activity on a specific device. And that's basically the level of integration with the future releases. Yes.
Yeah, thanks, Prashant. So So as one area we mentioned was the BigFix Compliance module, and it provides really thousands of checks which are based on various regulatory and controls for looking at your endpoints to make sure that they're secure and compliant. One thing we wanted to make you aware of is that we now have a PCI DSS compliance add-on to the BigFix Compliance module. So what that does is release a large number of content for different operating systems, Windows, Linux, and other systems. So if you're required from a regulatory point of view to be PCI DSS compliant, BigFix can not only manage your other endpoints but also provide you some really easy to consume reporting for the PCI DSS module, and also actually apply those checks against those endpoints. So not only reporting, but actually applying those fixes to those endpoints and making sure that you're secure and compliant. So certainly it's an exciting module that's been added to the BigFix Compliance module, which has been around for many years. So if you're interested in that feature, please let us know. We can give you some more details as well. Next slide, please. So with that, if you've got any need any information regarding IBM BigFix or QRadar or the integration of both of those products, feel free to contact Rashan or myself and my colleague Manny Santana in Sydney as well. So we're based here in Australia, but obviously you might have some questions and you're based across Asia Pacific listening to the webinar today. Feel free to contact us and we can route you to the right team and or visit you and assist you, giving you some more information on both of those products. So what we'll do, we'll go to the next slide. It's just, I think it's really to wrap up and see if we've got any questions which we can help you with. One of the questions asked was, I guess, in terms of the integration, what's required to set that up. So one of the so to enable this integration within your BigFix environment, it's really having the web reports capability turned on, which you would have in most cases. So that's really enabling that reporting function, and it surfaces up the actual information into QRadar, and then a QRadar specialist can go into the QRadar system and point to your BigFix environment. Michelle, I'm not sure if anything you want to add there in terms of the integration.
Yeah, so absolutely. So like Daz mentioned, it's pretty straightforward. We basically use the web report API to fetch information out from BigFix into QRadar, and we just normalize that in real time. So what we efficiently do is, unlike static scanners, it's just not an XML file that we query, but this is an API integration. So your data that you're going to get in QRadar is going to be more real time from BigFix, rather than a static XML that gets populated every time a scan is run in a conventional scanner.
That's great. Okay, and I think one question around the PCI module operating systems. Yeah, so that's currently Windows and Linux systems today. That'll be expanding over time as well. So there's happy to give you some more specific information on that. There's a large series of checklists for that area as well. And I think the other question was I guess in QRadar, I guess in terms of what systems, Rashad, does I guess QRadar get different feeds from? We've got BigFix here, but what other types of platforms does it get feeds from?
So we support I think about 20 or 30 different types of scanners out of the box.
Yeah. Yeah.
In essence, it's just not going to be one static BigFix integration. With the Vulnerability Manager in QRadar, basically what we can do is take in feeds across from different scanners and summarize that back into a single repository, and then you can filter based on whether it was detected by BigFix or Qualys or Nessus, or there's an entire list of scanners that are available that we support out of the box. So I'm happy to share that list.
Yeah, okay. All right, I think that's all we've got for today in terms of questions. Like I said, feel free to contact us. Otherwise, We look forward to having you join us at the webinar next year on endpoint and QRadar and other products from IBM Security. So with that, I'll close the webinar, and thanks very much for joining.
Thanks. Thank you all.